5 hours. That is how long it took, on the first day of July in the year 1097, for the largest army Europe had put in the field in 300 years to be reduced to a shrinking circle of dying men who could not touch the enemy killing them. They could see them. They could hear them. They could not reach them. And the man who built that trap did not want their land, or their gold, or their god. He wanted something they had taken from him 3 weeks earlier, something most of them had already forgotten they were holding. Welcome back. If you're here for history told the way it actually happened, with nothing sanded smooth, you're in the right place. Settle in. Whether you're driving, working, or drifting off to sleep, tonight we're standing on a burned plain in Anatolia. And before this is over, you'll learn why one man who walked out of that circle alive is remembered today not for surviving it, but for what he did exactly 1 year later. Here's the situation. The Crusaders had just taken the city of Nicaea, and victory had done to them what victory does to everyone. It had made them certain. Certain enough to split their army in half on open ground. Bohemond of Taranto rode ahead with the smaller column, Robert, Duke of Normandy, at his side. And among those lords rode a rich, cautious, thoroughly likable nobleman named Stephen of Blois. Remember him. He survives today. He does not survive what today teaches him. Miles behind, out of sight and out of earshot, came the second column under Godfrey of Bouillon and Raymond of Toulouse. Between the two halves lay nothing but empty grass. And what they had carried out of Nicaea, without ever thinking twice about it, was the family of the Turkish Sultan, his treasury, his wife, his children. They took them as prisoners and moved on. Kilij Arslan had not thought about anything else since. Bohemond made 2 decisions that morning. One saved 4,000 lives. The other nearly cost him every man he had. For days his scouts had reported the same thing. Turkish riders on the ridgelines, in plain view, tracking the column at a walking pace, making no effort to disappear. They were not hiding. That was the message. A man who wants to ambush you stays invisible. A man who lets you watch him is telling you that knowing will not save you. The man giving those orders had been humiliated once already. At Nicaea, Kilij Arslan had ridden out expecting a mob of foreign pilgrims and met a professional army instead. He lost the city, and his family inside it. And he did not intend to be surprised twice. So he learned. These Westerners were lethal in a straight line and helpless out of one. And they had just split their column in half. Then he did what proud men almost never do. He sent word to the Danishmends, Turkish rivals he had fought for years, and asked them to ride with him. They came. Shared enemies make the strangest friendships. And this one was worth 7,000 horsemen. Understand what was coming because Europe did not. A Seljuk boy was put on a horse at 4 years old. By manhood, he could loose an arrow every few seconds at a full gallop, then twist backward in the saddle and shoot whatever was chasing him. They did not fight the way Europe fought. They fought the way weather fights. You cannot charge a storm. The Crusaders saw the dust first, then the size of it. Camp followers threw up a perimeter, the infantry closed ranks, and Bohemond set the camp with its back against a river marsh. Nothing could reach them from behind. It also meant that when the day turned, there would be nowhere left to run. Then he did the aggressive thing. He and Robert of Normandy took every mounted knight they had and charged, not to win, but to buy the infantry minutes. The fighting ran over an hour, and the arithmetic never once bent their way. They pulled back in good order, which is far harder than it sounds, and is the only reason there was still an army at all. Then, at their own gate, the knights of Christendom climbed down and stood in the dirt on foot. It looks like surrender. It was the smartest thing done all day. A stationary horseman is a target 3 times the size of a man, and against archers who never miss twice, mounted knights standing still are just a taller row of corpses. So the horses went inside the ring, out of the arrow line, held back for a counterattack no one had any reason to believe would ever come. Here is the part almost everyone gets wrong. The arrows were not meant to kill them. At the range the Turks were shooting, most arrows didn't punch through mail. They hit shields. They hit shoulders and thighs. They stuck in the ground, in horses, in the wooden frames of carts. And that was the point. Kilij Arslan was not trying to destroy an army in an afternoon. He was trying to spend one. Every wounded man pulled a second man out of the line to carry him. Every hour under that sun emptied a canteen that could not be refilled. He was not fighting the Crusaders. He was fighting their supply of blood, water, and nerve, and all three were finite. The ring closed. Riders circled the camp at a canter, loosing as they went, wheeling away before anyone could answer. The Crusaders locked their shields into a wall, and it worked, mostly. But a shield wall has seams, and arrows find seams. Men went down without ever seeing what hit them. Worse were the ones who arrived late. Small bands of infantry, strung out on the road behind the vanguard, walked into a battle nobody had warned them about. They came over the rise in 10s and 20s, and the Turks rode them down in the open before they understood what they were looking at. They died confused. That is the detail the chronicles keep returning to. Bohemond knew the only thing that could save him was information, so he sent riders. Not one, several, in different directions, carrying the same message. We are surrounded. Come now. Most were cut out of the saddle within sight of the camp, and the men on the wall watched it happen. One got through. History never learned his name. It should have. And if you knew your history that day, you knew exactly what this looked like. In 53 BC, on a plain not far from there, a Roman army stood in a square like this one while horse archers circled and shot. That was Carrhae. 7 legions destroyed, their commander killed, their eagles taken, and Rome did not get them back for a generation. Every educated man in that camp had heard the story. Now they were standing inside it. Which is when the people nobody writes about walked into the middle of it. The camp followers, the wives, the women who had walked from France, went out into the arrow line with skins and jars, crawling between the ranks, pressing water into the hands of men who could not lower their shields to reach for it, then dragging the wounded back by the arms. In that heat, water was not comfort. Water was ammunition, and they were the supply line. And the Turks tighten the ring. They do not charge, they do not commit. They ride to the edge of range, loose, and vanish into their own dust. They bleed the Crusaders one man at a time, and time is entirely on their side. 5 hours of it. Shields split down the grain, lips cracked, men stopped speaking. And Bohemond walked the line, on foot, in full view, saying the only 2 things left worth saying. Stand fast, hold the line. Here is the cruelty of it. At that moment, the second column was less than an hour away and closing. Not one man inside that ring knew it. They were not dying of arrows. They were dying of not knowing. And a soldier who believes no one is coming will break long before his shield does. And then Kilij Arslan made the only mistake he made all day. He looked at that camp, at the broken shields and the men on their knees, and he decided they were finished. He had won. He simply had to keep doing nothing for another hour. But there is a reason the best commander on that field stopped commanding and started charging, and it had nothing to do with tactics. Every hour he stood there was another hour his wife and his children sat in a Latin camp somewhere behind that ring as property. Patience is easy when the stakes are territory. It is almost impossible when the stakes are your family. Battles are not lost by arithmetic. They are lost by the men doing the arithmetic, and by what those men cannot stop thinking about. So he committed. The horns went, and 7,000 riders that had spent 5 hours refusing to close came in all at once. And the fighting changed character completely. No more distance, no more circling. Sword against sword, shield against horseflesh. men grabbing bridles and pulling riders down into the dirt. The Crusaders were half dead from thirst and could barely lift their arms, and they held anyway, giving ground by inches and taking it back the same way. Then the line broke somewhere, and Turkish horsemen were inside the camp. Inside, where the wounded were laid out in rows, where the priests were still praying, where the women were still filling jars, where there were children. That is the moment the battle stopped being a battle. And here is where that marsh at their backs, the one that had trapped them, saved them. There was nowhere to run. No tree line, no road, no possibility of a man deciding privately that this was enough and slipping away. A man who cannot run discovers what he is. What those men discovered was that they would rather die in the line than let a rider reach the tents behind them. A knot of Norman knights, the last men with anything left, threw themselves into the breach and shoved it back out. It cost them badly. It bought perhaps 10 minutes, and in those 10 minutes, someone on the perimeter looked up and saw dust on the horizon. There had been dust all day, but this dust was rising in the west, behind the Turkish lines, and it was too wide and moving too fast to be anything small. Then banners, then crosses catching the afternoon sun. The second column had arrived, and the arithmetic of the entire battle broke in a single minute. Godfrey of Bouillon came in first, Raymond of Toulouse behind him, and they did not stop to form up or survey the ground. They went straight into the Turkish flank at a gallop, and everything the Seljuks were collapsed on contact because of one thing almost nobody says out loud. A horse archer is not made of arrows. He is made of distance. The bow is only the delivery system. Take away the space he needs to circle, loose, and pull back, and you have taken away the entire army all at once. You do not beat a horse archer. You take away his distance, and he beats himself.
Do not worry, Princess.
Then Bohemond saw the Turks turning outward to face the new threat, and he did the thing he had been holding those horses for all day. His men remounted and burst out of the camp from the inside. Squeezed between the relief column driving in and the vanguard driving out, the ring that had been strangling them for 5 hours became a body of men with enemies on both sides of it. The trap reversed. And it got worse for Kilij Arslan, because a third force under Bishop Adhemar had swung wide through the hills and appeared behind his position. In one afternoon, he went from having an army surrounded to being surrounded himself. He gave the order to withdraw, and it was not an orderly withdrawal. The Seljuks left their camp standing, their supplies, their tents, everything. And that flanking march existed for exactly one reason. Because hours earlier, one rider out of many had made it through the ring alive. Most were killed in front of their own comrades. He was not. Nobody wrote down who he was. The largest battle of that year in Asia Minor was decided by a man whose name no chronicle bothered to record. The Crusaders held the field. About 4,000 of them were dead, and the Seljuk losses were roughly the same, which tells you everything about what kind of victory this was. There was no celebration. There was digging in ground too hard and too hot to dig, and a great many men who had walked from Europe together, finishing the day burying each other in Anatolian dirt. And the women who carried the water do not appear in any chronicle by name. Not one of them. But there is no version of that afternoon where the line holds 5 hours without water reaching the men in it. History remembers who charged. It rarely remembers who kept the survivors alive long enough to be rescued. And Stephen of Blois? He walked off that plain a hero, a man who stood in the ring and did not break. 1 year later, at the siege of Antioch, with the army starving and the situation looking hopeless, he slipped away in the night and rode for home. He met the emperor on the road and told him the crusade was lost, which turned back a relief army that might have arrived in time. He carried the name of coward to his grave and beyond it. Dorylaeum did not break him. It only showed him where his limit was, and a year later, he found it. Which is the thing worth taking from that plain? Courage is not the absence of the wish to run. On that field, 4,000 men wished to run and stood still anyway. That is the only reason anyone remembers the First Crusade at all.